And welcome back to Capitol Tonight. So this week could aptly be called Pollapalooza because 4 polls were released this week, and each of them gauged the proximity of the 2 candidates competing for governor. And each of them determined a completely different degree of separation between the 2 candidates. So here to discuss this week's potpourri of polls, among other things, of course, are none other than the reporters of the Roundtable, and they need no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway for you. Casey Seiler is the state editor of the Albany Times-Union. Jimmy Vielkind is a political reporter and blogger for that paper, and our very own Caitlin Ross is with us tonight. Gentlemen and lady, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome.
Great
nice enunciation, Liz.
Thank you very much.
Potpourri of polls. That sounds like something you'd see on a menu.
That's
Delish.
You like that? Actually, I have to give cred to Lee Miringoff. He created that one.
Of Marist.
Of Marist, yes, he was here. So let us talk about the polls. Who wants to start? Do you want to start, Kate?
Yeah, well, I'd say from a TV standpoint, it gave us some really great fodder over the past week. It was like every single day there was a new poll, and they were so drastically different. It was really interesting trying to figure out where everyone fit in these polls.
Right.
It's been
and confusing.
You could say, if you want to be sort of a glass half full kind of guy, that it's been a wonderful education into sort of the science or the art of polling, looking at things like whether you get different data if you're looking at likely voters versus simply registered voters. There was a big question, a big debate, especially between Siena and Quinnipiac, over whether or not it's time yet to say that people are likely voters as opposed to just registered voters, and whether or not that skewed the results. Then again, I think it also raises the question in the public mind of how much should we be paying attention to this? And I can't say for sure if we go through this in every election cycle that there's this kind of gaggle of polls right after the primary. We all pay attention to it, and then we all go, oh, wait a minute, we ought to be paying attention to the policies and the platforms and not just
policy?
the not just the horse
policy?
race. Yeah.
Well, there are a couple of easy explanations for the big variation. One was the presence of Rick Lazio. He was polled in 2 of the polls. I believe he was in Marist and Siena, and he showed up taking about 8 or 9% of the vote, give or take. So that mostly cut into Palladino's margins. In Siena, he was found to be 33 points behind Andrew Cuomo, and in the Marist poll today, I believe it was 19 points behind.
19. Well, it depends, because Marist was tricky. Marist was like, we're going to pull everything. We're going to pull leaners, we're going to pull registered, and we're going to pull likelies just to be safe.
Right, and of course, Siena only pulled the registered voters. But then you get into this weird question of, well, okay, how do you determine likely voters? Are they people who have voted once in the past 4 years, twice in the past 4 years, et cetera, et cetera? There's also the question of weighting your sample. You have to think about what is the electorate? How many women are you polling versus how many men?
Jimmy's going to walk out on
there
us. Here
are
he goes.
more women, of course, in the population than men. There are more women in the electorate than men. And what do you weight the various regions of the state? Do you weight them by their population? Of course, more people live in Manhattan, but the voting parity based on past election results is it doesn't skew as positively. There's a greater turnout upstate, which compensates for the lack of population. So there's lots of crazy things going on. Pollsters can rub it every which way. And that's why we're seeing these variations.
And pollsters, especially, Siena is smarting now because they released a poll just before primary day that found the gubernatorial race, the Republican primary, neck and neck. And of course, it turned out to be a Palladino blowout.
And you were there, Caitlin. I mean, and Palladino wasn't surprised, right?
He wasn't at all, and that was the interesting thing. We went into this, and immediately right off the bat, everyone in the Palladino camp was so positive. We walked in, I was talking to the Erie County chair, oh, we're going to win. I'm talking to Chris Collins, the county executive, no problem, we're going to win. They had this in the bag at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so it was really interesting kind of as the day progressed, and they'd keep giving me the numbers of voter turnout. And as soon as they started hitting those numbers, 25% voter turnout, 30% voter turnout, they said absolutely.
Well, and what they got to was 94% of the vote in Erie County. It is, but like here's the problem.
Lazio was banking on about 30%, 20%, and he was counting on a higher margin in Nassau County.
Right, but here's the problem, though. We're not going to have that kind of turnout. It's not going to matter how many people show up from Erie County on Election Day because people from New York City everybody's going to be able to vote on Election Day all in the same contest, and it's going to be a vastly different thing. That's why you're seeing today Andrew Cuomo upstate, and you're seeing Carl Palladino say, well, I'm going to spend, exactly, all of my time downstate trying to convince New Yorkers that I'm not crazy, basically.
Right. And then the question also is, who's excited to vote? Who wants to be? And I think one thing that people are rightly taking away from Carl Palladino's primary victory in such a high margin is that there are people excited to vote for him. There are people who want to go to the polls, people who have shown up, particularly upstate.
Today. That's true. Yep.
And with Andrew Cuomo, that's something that we're not seeing. One thing that was telling, and Liz, you put this on your blog today, was that there was a letter from the editor and publisher of the Amsterdam News, historically black newspaper, basically saying, hey, Andrew, where are you? We haven't seen you since 2002. What are you doing to reach out to our community, our readership, which has been a consistent, important, and historically Democratic constituency? And the letter went on to say that African American voters have, maybe they don't like Palladino, but there is a black candidate in the race, New York City Councilman Charles Barron, and we could just sit home. Don't take us for granted. If you do, you'll get burned.
It's going to be very dangerous for him, that's true.
Yeah.
And actually today we saw him, you know, it was funny, he, and Caitlin, I know you saw this too, he was saying, well, yes, I'm angry, but I'm angry in a good way.
Yeah, I'm so positively angry. Yes.
But then he was in Rochester and he gave an unusually angry speech. I mean, is that going to work to, like, generate voter anger? Can you convince the people who are angry that anger could be channeled in a good way, and if you haven't been angry up to this point, all of a sudden you're going to get angry?
Are you the right angry person?
Right. I mean, it's sort of, people will be able to sniff out if it's a kind of plastic anger, and if it's
Plastic
a very
anger.
plastic, you know, fake anger.
Explosive.
And if people see the really angry Andrew Cuomo from all reports and people who have seen the real angry Cuomo, that might not exactly
pretty.
play very well as well. But
Not pretty.
the interesting thing about that line, the line that you just quoted, that I understand anger, but what are you going to do with it? What are you going to build with it? Is that is the exact same line that was used by Rick Lazio when he spoke to an Associated Press meeting earlier this
right.
week. And the last thing that Andrew Cuomo wants is to be using lines that have been used by Rick Lazio.
And he's actually talking about Rick Lazio. In fact, today he was like, I'd like to have Rick Lazio in there. As far as I know, Rick Lazio is in the race. And why? Because
he's going to siphon votes from Palladino.
Exactly.
And as Mike Wall, the chairman of the Conservative Party, is so fond of reminding us all, no Republican has won statewide office without the cross-endorsement of the Conservative Party since 1974.
we're going to get angry mail from that, because I know that is a point of contention for a lot of
But the
people.
point is,
They had it, but did they
True.
need it, is the
Right,
question.
exactly.
Right.
Thank you,
But the
Casey.
point is that if this is going to be a close election, the enrollment edge for Democrats in New York State is still 5-3. There are many more Democrats than Republicans. A GOP candidate is not going to win solely by having the Republican base behind him, especially with the courting that Andrew Cuomo has done to get Republicans to endorse him, validate him, and with some of the conservative rhetoric he's been espousing.
And the other reason that Cuomo wants Rick Lazio to stay in the race is so he can say, oh, I'd love to have Rick Lazio join in the debates.
Oh, and,
As
and,
the,
absolutely.
and Kristen Davis and Jimmy
Charles
McMillan of the
Barron.
Rennes Too Damn High Party and everybody, so he can look like the grown-up on stage,
But also,
hopefully.
in terms of getting the Democrats, now you guys covered this, you were both there. The Democrats are now having all these surrogates all over the place. What were they saying?
Right. Well, that's what we've seen. I think every day this week there was an event. The Jewish community came out against Carl Palladino. The black community came out against Carl Palladino. Today, the Hispanic community was coming out against Carl Palladino. And it's all these people that were kind of sent to go say these things and talk about it. And even Jimmy, you asked a great question at one of the events. It was the Albany County Democrats against Carl Palladino. And Jimmy asked Mayor Jennings, how much did Andrew Cuomo have to do with it? And he took offense to the question. He actually was offended.
He said, nothing at all, babe. And but at the same time, you know, the Albany Democrats, particularly Mayor Jennings, has been a consistent ally of Cuomo. He endorsed him in his 2002 gubernatorial run, was a key ally upstate. The Albany County Democratic Committee was one of the early agitators.
He speculated
this
as
year.
LG, remember? When we
Yeah.
all were
Yeah.
running to
His
Rye
name was
and
out there.
asking him if
Yep.
he was going to be lieutenant governor.
And so Cuomo has a deep relationship with the Albany Dems. Mayor Duffy has come to do a fundraiser for them. Cuomo went to the Albany County Democratic Picnic. It's one of the few Democratic committees with which he has appeared. And so you couple that relationship with the fact that one of Cuomo's aides was, you know, kind of in the background whispering to one of the Democratic committee guys. And
It's orchestrated,
you know,
right? It's
yeah.
orchestrated. Here's the thing. It's kind of like you say, plastic anger. Is it really feeling real? I mean, one thing you can say about Carl Palladino is he doesn't feel fabricated. It's all this grassroots
what you
support.
see is what you get.
Versus
Palladino.
carefully orchestrated Democrats coming out every day to say Carl Palladino is bad and this and that and the other thing. It just doesn't feel genuine.
And everybody's talked about and commented on the fact that Cuomo has taken every step right, that it's been a methodical path so far. And if he ends up getting tripped up by that very kind of cool, methodical approach at this point, it would be an almost Greek, comeuppance.
Well, talk about tripping up. I mean, we saw Elliot Spitzer. What was that about?
Wow, that was really intense. I think everybody just kind of went silent listening to that. And he just carried on and on and on, and he really attacked Andrew Cuomo. He really went after him.
Well, but what was interesting was that he was saying, Cuomo is somebody who has a real temper and has made a lot of enemies on his path, and there was almost projection going on. It seemed
I
like,
wouldn't know anything about that.
Who are we talking about here? There was almost that aspect to it. For Spitzer, a guy who is not big into self-reflection, if you put him on the couch, it's quite fascinating.
And remember that Spitzer came out, I think it was April, and he gave an interview to the New York Times and said, "Oh, I question his temperament for governor."
Right.
So he's not treading necessarily new ground, and his new show, Parker Spitzer's, debuting October 4th on CNN.
You just gave the guy a free plug.
But that's the whole point. So why is he doing this? Why is he coming out now? Why is Elliot Spitzer suddenly grabbing headlines for himself? Well, I'm sure it's just coincidental.
Well, but also we should say that the two of these guys have a history together, and
Right.
it dates back to the days when Andrew Cuomo was at HUD and Elliot Spitzer was a new attorney general, and they battled over gun control lawsuits. I mean, it dates back a long time.
To say nothing of the travel records scandal of the summer of 2007, in
Right.
which Cuomo issued a report raising questions about how Elliot Spitzer's members of the administration handled a FOIL request.
So unfortunately, we have to wrap this up, but I just want to ask you a quick question. What new photoshopped flyer might we see next, do you think? We saw Andrew, we saw Andrew Cuomo, you don't have to answer. We saw Andrew Cuomo as Pinocchio. We saw Andrew Cuomo in the shower. This is all coming compliments of Carol Palladino. You're the jokester. You want to bring us out, Casey?
I don't want to be known as the jokester. I don't want to put ideas in anybody's head, because the Gothic ideas that they're coming up with on their own are so
Yeah, they're
wonderful.
pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
Or what next new adult is going to be in a fuzzy animal costume?
Yeah.
That's not
They have
bad.
the duck, they have the chicken.
Turkey?
We're going to see massive Disney copyright infringement. We're going to see
Exactly.
Andrew Cuomo as Daffy
Exactly.
Duck, as
We're gonna
Donald Duck, as Darkwing Duck,
Yeah.
as Scrooge McDuck.
Carlos Collodi spinning in his grave.
On this note, there is more to come. Will the Skaza Favor become the Skaza Favi? Stay tuned for the update in New York 23, the congressional district race. It is in this week's Trail Mix. Plus, we'll have another gem that we pulled from the YNN archives. We'll be right back.